Welcome back to our Web Extra. We are joined by the Attorney General candidates, Democrat Josh Kaul, Republican Eric Toney. Thanks, guys, for sticking around. This is where it's going to get fun and interesting, right? Let's go back and let's talk about staffing, because that was a major issue in the broadcast. We talked about the WisPolitics numbers. Big picture, there are unfilled positions, right? So I'm curious why that is and what needs to be done to fill those positions. Mr. Toney, we'll start with you.
Well, what we saw and what the Attorney General references are, he uses the number 90, but the director of DCI said 88 out of 113. He still refuses to address the statement that his director of DCI made at the Badger State Sheriff's Conference, and it doesn't even appear that they were making any efforts to hire these positions as they were getting unfilled until now.
How would you fill positions?
We would post the positions and make sure that we're bringing agents in because they're very sought after positions. And it's one of the top law enforcement agency in the state of Wisconsin, that there are great investigators and law enforcement across Wisconsin and other parts of the country that want to work at our DCI agency. And so we need to make sure we're posting the positions, prioritizing that, and adding more DCI agents to help address the violent crime and drug epidemic that we have.
Are you not actively working to fill positions?
We absolutely are, and there's some fundamental misunderstandings here from Mr. Toney. First, we have some of the highest filled position rates in state government if you look at the work we've done. Also, he's trying to use secondhand information rather than the actual hard numbers we have. The truth of the matter is that over 90% or higher has been filled in DCI during my time as Attorney General, and we hire people in waves. The reason we do that is because when you're managing a 700-person agency, having all the new DCI agents trained at the same time is efficient. That's how it happened under A.G. Schimmel. It's how it continues to happen under me. So we have been in the process for a while of working to hire 12 additional investigators. The other thing that Mr. Toney hasn't mentioned is throughout my time in office, I have fought for more resources for public safety in Wisconsin. When the legislature passed the lame duck laws, one of the things they did was they intentionally worked to strain our budget. We've worked through that, but Eric Toney was silent when that was happening. He didn't call out on the legislature and say, we need these funds at DOJ. And now, as we often see from politicians acting cynically, he's trying to take advantage of that for his political benefit.
Is the legislature partly to blame?
No, what the Attorney General is doing is blaming someone else when the buck stops with him. And he continually refuses to address the statement made by Tina Virgil. And that might be because there was a lawsuit that was filed against him by Tina Virgil where he refuses to address the claim that she made at the conference. During historic violence, when families feel less safe, our Attorney General has devoted less resources to public safety with DCI agents as well as prosecutor positions. And that doesn't even get into the crime lab. That was the thing he campaigned on. And the reality, PolitiFact checked this. He's taking in thousands of less items. He's testing thousands of less and taking longer to do it in most categories, including DNA. And he attacked Brad Schimmel for that left and right. And he's worse than what he took over. And he tried to blame COVID. And if COVID were the issue, he could have called Tony Evers and demanded that ARPA funds be released for public safety, which I've called on the governor to do, and our Attorney General has stood silent as he tries to pass the buck and not take responsibility for his public safety.
First on the crime labs.
Are they turning cases at the rate you would like?
So first of all, we have reduced significantly the number of DNA cases that are awaiting testing. That means fewer investigators and prosecutors are waiting on evidence. We're on the right track with those cases. We have more work to do, but we've made real progress. We've also increased the complexity of the testing we're doing. We now use probabilistic genotyping so we can get results in more cases, which means solving more crimes. But Mr. Toney talked about passing the buck. You know, a great example of that is a case that his office handled that involved somebody who had been convicted of 9 felonies. And his office just missed that. They missed the vast majority of that person's criminal record, and he was released on $500 bail. Less than 2 weeks later, he killed a firefighter. Now, Eric Toney has tried to blame everybody else for this, but he has not accepted responsibility for his office's role in mishandling that case.
Would you like to respond?
You know, it's interesting because the Attorney General hired the prosecutor that handled that case, so he didn't seem to have a problem with it. And that's a very good prosecutor.
He's passing the buck again.
And, well, I'm not finished. If you want to talk about passing the buck, our Attorney General's office was prosecuting one of those Darrell Brooks cases under very similar circumstances where $500 cash was ordered. And my prosecutor in that case objected to the defendant's request for a signature bond. In the Darrell Brooks case that his office was prosecuting, they failed to note an out-of-state criminal record and an active warrant in the state of Nevada. That's why we don't attack frontline prosecutors like our Attorney General has done, because they are doing so much amazing work across our state. and we need more of them, and they are making life and death decisions with not enough time, and our Attorney General is attacking frontline prosecutors. I frankly think it's shameful, and that was a horrific circumstance where after he was released by the judge on low cash, when we objected to it, he was released on a warrant to Marathon County, where they weren't aware of that prior record because of the unique circumstances of that case.
I want to get to a couple of other issues.
It's not the frontline prosecutor, Matt. It's the DA's office that's responsible. And under Mr. Tony's leadership...
So are you taking responsibility for your office?
Under Mr. Tony's leadership, over a 6-year period, from 2013 to 2018, 80% of people who were charged with felony domestic abuse cases, 80% of them were not convicted of a felony. Only 20%, 1 out of 5. That's because of the leadership of the DA's office, and the same thing applies to this case where they missed the 9-time felon's record.
And he continues to refuse to even address his office's issue with Darrell Brooks. When I took over as district attorney on domestic violence cases, we make sure every single one of those cases is reviewed and charged within 2 weeks or sent back for follow-up per state statute, and devoted an entire prosecutor to prosecuting domestic violence cases because we prioritize that type of violence. And our Attorney General continues to refuse to address his office and his role in the Darrell Brooks case, which is going on right now.
He said they prioritize it, but they were weak on these cases. Only 1 out of 5 felony charges resulted in a felony conviction.
Well, if you talk to any defense attorneys or judges in Fond du Lac County, they will never say that I'm soft on crime. Maybe you should go and have conversation with them.
Let me shift. Let's get to a couple of other quick things. Let's talk about school safety. In 2018, the Justice Department created the Office of School Safety. The initial goal was to distribute the $100 million in grant money. Federal funding is expected to run out by the end of 2023. Should this continue to be funded by the state? How much, and is this program important to the Justice Department? Mr. Call, I'll start with you.
Absolutely, it should be funded by the state. You know, my kids go to schools that feel very different than the public schools that I went to in Wisconsin. And that's for good reason. It's to keep our kids safe. But we have to do more than just make our schools fortresses to keep our kids safe. We also need to make the kinds of investments that our Office of School Safety has been making. As an example, we created a 24/7 tip line that anybody who has information about a threat to school safety, including concerns that somebody might harm themselves, they can report that to trained analysts who ensure that an appropriate response is deployed. I have called for long-term funding for that Office of School Safety from our state legislature, and I am hopeful that in the next budget they will provide that funding.
Should the state continue funding this?
Absolutely. Parents need to know when they drop their child off at school, they're going to pick them up or they're going to come home on the bus at the end of the day, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our kids, and we have to address the mental health crisis that is going on in our country and in Wisconsin to make sure that we're identifying and addressing these issues before it leads to these type of horrific shootings. And we have a slow-moving mass shooting going on in the city of Milwaukee right now, where I think it's been about over 20 kids that have been murdered in the city of Milwaukee, and it doesn't get enough attention. And so we have to do everything we can within the bounds of the law to make sure we're protecting our kids without infringing on one's constitutional rights. And we have a mental health commitment law on the books right now. When someone's a danger to themselves or others, it's treatable, that they can be committed inpatient. They get in front of a judge within 72 hours. They can have a jury trial within 2 weeks to impact those Second Amendment rights. We have laws on the books that we can use to try to protect our communities.
I want to get to 2 other quick topics.
Can I address the gun safety issue that Mr. Tony was referring to there, Matt?
Sure.
Mr. Tony says he wants to do what's necessary for public safety, but when it comes to gun safety, he's consistently putting politics ahead of public safety. He won't support extreme risk protection orders. He hasn't even come out in support of universal background checks. So literally people can sell guns out of the trunk of their car, and unless they know that the person they're selling it to is a felon, law enforcement can't do anything. We need an attorney general who's going to fight to stop that flood of guns from getting out if there are procedures we can have. We conduct a lot of background checks already. Let's conduct them for all firearm sales.
Are you convinced that red flag laws actually work?
Absolutely. If law enforcement or a family member knows that somebody is a danger to themselves or others, we need to have a process that allows for intervention. The problem with the alternative that Mr. Tony is referring to is very rarely do people get brought into emergency detention for that, because what happens is then they're actually put in a confinement situation. just taking somebody's firearm away is much less intrusive, and it allows for law enforcement to respond to more cases and help keep more people safe.
You oppose red flag laws.
I support the law we have on the books. When I was in private practice, I did about 2.5 years criminal defense, mental health, and juvenile law, and I've worked on these mental health commitment cases. I know how the law works. It's almost verbatim what the Attorney General was just saying we should do, which we already have on the books. I've prosecuted enough violent felons that have used guns to shoot people and illegally possess them that do not care what the law is, and they have committed violent crime. And what the Attorney General is proposing is layering on an additional crime which will not deter these violent felons from continuing to commit violence.
One more topic before I let you go. The Harry Waite case has received a lot of attention in Racine County. The Racine County man who admitted to requesting absentee ballots in other people's names, the Racine Mayor, Assembly Speaker Robin Voss. Mr. Call, your Department of Justice helped investigate it. You devoted resources to that. Why was that a case that the state needed to get involved with?
Well, this is a pending case, so I can't say too much about the specifics of the case. What I can say generally, though, is that we are committed at the Department of Justice to protecting free and fair elections. We have done that throughout my time in office. That's why I haven't supported things like my opponent has, like the Gableman investigation. If our election laws are violated, and particularly if they're intentionally violated, that's an attack on our system of government, and we need to make sure that the laws are enforced.
Would you have stepped in and devoted Justice Department resources to this case?
One thing to be clear, that the defendant is presumed innocent and lesser until proven guilty. I know the Attorney General feels the same way. I've seen that in his press releases before. But I think that's important for the public to know, because we don't convict people through public opinion. But we have to defend the integrity of our elections, and when people violate those election laws, they should be held accountable. And what we have to do is look at what is the violation, what have they done, and what should the particular punishment be. Some of the cases that we filed, we've resolved with misdemeanor resolutions, some of them with felony resolutions, and we've offered people opportunities to not have a conviction depending on what their alleged violation may be. We take a balanced approach on a case-by-case basis, and when we investigate issues with elections, and if nothing's found, my hope is that that gives the public greater confidence in our elections, that they can know when they're casting their ballot that we trust the results, because we have great clerks across Wisconsin that are doing phenomenal work in making sure that our votes count, that we have integrity in that process, and I support that.
All right, last one, I promise, before I go. And for voters who have sat and listened to all of this, and we appreciate you still on the Web Extra, right, if you're still listening, and they hear the debate, that they see the back and forth, they see a Democrat, they see a Republican, why should the Attorney General's office, and why is the Attorney General's office so political?
Well, I wouldn't object, frankly, to the Attorney General's office being nonpartisan, because a lot of what the AG does is consistent whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. And I'm really proud to have worked across the aisle to advance public safety issues with the legislature, and having worked with AGs of both parties on critical issues like fighting the opioid epidemic. That being said, there are differences in values, and you can certainly see that in this campaign, about how to use limited resources. For example, I don't think we should be using our DOJ's limited resources to go after people for abortions. I don't think we should be using them to go after people for bogus claims of election fraud. My opponent disagrees with me on that. Sometimes the challenges to federal policy will vary from administration to administration. I've been committed to protecting our natural resources, for example. Mr. Toney has indicated he's less committed to that. So there are differences, and those are often partisan in nature. But a lot of what we are doing is about protecting and enforcing the rule of law.
Mr. Shaw, I'll give you the final word on the politics of the Department of Justice.
The job of our Attorney General, just like my job as a district attorney, is to enforce the rule of law, not to say, I don't like that law, I'm not going to follow it, or, well, that law aligns with my values, so I'm going to challenge it because I don't like it, or I'm going to support it. And that's what my record is as a district attorney, enforcing and following the rule of law. That's why I was elected back in 2012 as a DA with bipartisan support. That's why I have bipartisan support now, overwhelming support from law enforcement, the Milwaukee Police Association, Racine and Kenosha, West Allis Police Associations, unanimous endorsement from the Wisconsin Fraternal Order of Police, the Wisconsin Troopers Association. Tony Evers appointed State Patrol Superintendent. Tony Burrell, who's now retired, has endorsed me, because even our law enforcement wants an Attorney General that's going to enforce the rule of law, not just when they agree with it. And our Attorney General continues to speak about cases cases when he hasn't even read the facts or the criminal complaint or refuses to acknowledge that, which I think is pretty disturbing. I don't comment on cases when I don't have the information. That's what I've done my best to do during this campaign, but our Attorney General feels otherwise and won't even comment on his public safety failures.
All right, we have to leave it there. We hope voters have gotten some sense of your positions and greater understanding of the role of the Attorney General and what is at stake in this election. Eric Toney, Josh Kaul, thank you for staying around for the Web Extra.
Thank you.
Matt.